Okay, we are going through the Bible in a year, chunk by chunk by chunk, taking some pretty big pieces and sometimes taking some smaller pieces. Right now we are in 1 Kings, and we're going to take a medium-sized piece as we're going through here. We've been looking at the whole Bible since the beginning of the year, so we did Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which is known as the Law collectively, or the Law of Moses, or the Torah. And then followed by the Torah, you find the books of history. And those start with the book of Joshua. And Joshua goes in and he conquers the land. And as he conquers the land, he divides it up between the tribes of Israel. Now, a big theme of the Bible here goes all the way back to Abraham, that God is going to bless all of the world through Abraham and through his family. And so we're seeing the establishment of the kingdom, the earthly kingdom, that God is setting up for these people, Israel. So Joshua goes in and he conquers the land and he gives it to the 12 tribes. They are there. God is their king. And then you get to the book of Judges. God is their king, but they have a lot of trouble. They have this whole cycle of serving God and then getting in trouble and calling out to God and God rescuing them, raising up a judge. And we go through the book of Judges. It takes about 400 years to do the book of Judges. I think we did it in about 4 sessions. So we move on to that. And then we get into the period of the kings. And we find in the history books, the 12 history books of the Old Testament, that begins with 1 Samuel. And it begins with the birth of this boy, Samuel. His mother couldn't have children. She cries out to the Lord. The Lord gives a son, Samuel. He goes and serves with Eli. And God is still king, so this is during the time of the kings. During the time of the judges. And they want a king. They want to be like the rest of the nations. And God is like, you don't really want to be like that. And they were like, yes, we do. And so God told Samuel, he grows up, he becomes sort of the prophet priest in the land. He says, all right, give him a king. And they get Saul. And Saul is, he's a big guy. And it starts out pretty good, but it goes bad. And then they end up getting King David. So the books of 1 Samuel and the books of 2 Samuel really deal with the life of Saul and King David. You get to the end of David's life, and his family is fighting for the throne, and there's a little bit of a rebellion, but Solomon ends up with the throne, just like David had said would happen, and David makes him king. And we saw a little bit about that in the last session of the battle between the sons, and one of the sons trying to usurp his authority, but it ends up relatively peaceful and Solomon takes charge. Now, so 1 Kings chapters 1 through, I'm going to say 11, chapters 1 through 11 are about the United Kingdom, that now the kingdom that David established, he conquers Jerusalem, he's called the city of David. There's peace. Solomon is now going to rule, and the kingdom's going to be united. It's going to be a good time, actually. A lot of great things are going to happen. There's going to be peace. There's going to be prosperity. There's going to be wisdom. Solomon is going to build the temple during this period. A big part of this is Solomon building the temple in these first 11 chapters or so. We're going to read 2 things real quick. Chapter 2, King David, what he says to Solomon. It says, when the time came near for David to draw near to die, he gave charge to Solomon his son. This is chapter 2 of 1 Kings. He said, I'm going the way of all the earth. What a way to say it, huh? Going the way of all of the earth. So be strong and act like a man. And observe what the Lord requires. Walk in obedience to him. Keep his decrees and commands and his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Well, we did that. We did those first 5 books. You need to do all of that. Do this and you'll prosper in all that you do, wherever you go, that the Lord may keep his promise to me. The promise David made, the promise God made to David. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you'll never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. So there you go. And one of the things these kings were supposed to do, according to Deuteronomy, is they were supposed to write down the entire law. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, write down the whole thing. And then they would read it every day. And that would be how they would rule the nation, underneath the rule and the reign of God, ruling for God, essentially. So this is what David is saying to his son. And he said, now you yourselves know what Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to me, what he did to the two commanders of the army. You know all of this stuff. And so now be strong, be established, do a good thing. And so Solomon establishes his throne. Well, we get to chapter 3. This is a chapter, at least an incident that a lot of people sort of know about. I might not know about it exactly, but they know a little bit about it, Solomon and his wisdom. So what Solomon does is God tells him, ask whatever you want. And Solomon's like, well, I got all these people. What I need is wisdom. And God said, because you asked for wisdom and because you did not ask for the death of your enemies, because you didn't ask for riches, I'm going to give you peace and I'm going to give you prosperity as well. And you're going to get wisdom. And one of the rulings, and this ends up being said quite frequently, I heard it within the last couple of days, actually on a news feed, where they said he divided up the baby. Well, what's that all about? Well, Solomon, who's very, very wise, there were these two ladies and they both had children around the same time. One of them died, and they were both claiming the one that lived was their baby. And so they came to Solomon for him to decide, would you decide whose baby is this and who should take this baby and bring it up? And Solomon said, well, you're arguing about it and you're both saying it's your baby. Bring me the baby. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut the baby in half and each one of you can have half a baby. And the mother of the baby said, no, don't do that. Well, the lady who wasn't the mother of the baby said, you go ahead. So Solomon was so wise in showing who the real mother was, the one that showed the concern. So just his wisdom, and his wisdom just sort of exuding out of him. He ends up writing all of these proverbs. He ends up writing the book of Ecclesiastes. He ends up writing the Song of Solomon. He's very prolific in his writing, and he wrote about other things that we don't have about. It says he wrote about plants and all kinds of other things. God gave him all kinds of wisdom. He wrote a lot. So he was a wise man. He gets himself in trouble a little bit because he becomes sort of a tax and spend sort of a guy. And that's going to create a lot of problems down the road. So you get to chapter 4, it talks about, who is serving with him in the daily provisions. The daily provisions are like unbelievable. It says Solomon's daily provisions were 30 cores of the finest flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stock-fed cattle, 20 of pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, fowl. So he had exotic foods and regular foods, and he was feeding thousands of people, hundreds of his officials. And so it was a big deal. So it was big government, real big government. A lot of people like small government. Well, Solomon had big government and a lot of people in it. And again, you get his wisdom, how wise he is. Get to chapter 5, he's going to build the temple, and he makes all of these preparations for the temple. The temple is going to be centered in Jerusalem. So that's where you find this thing all through the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. You talk about the temple. Well, the temple will be here in Jerusalem, and it's Solomon who's going to build that temple. And it tells about how he builds it and what goes on in the furnishings. But he also built his own palace. It says that it took Solomon, in chapter 7, it took Solomon 13 years, however, to complete his own palace. And so he built the palace in the forest of Lebanon, and it tells how long it took to do it. And so he spends a lot of time building his own place, and he builds the temple as well. But it's the tide's starting to turn a little bit. He's taking a little bit of advantage maybe as king. He dedicates the temple, the glory of God comes in, and, God appears to Solomon again. He dedicates the temple. This will be the place where everybody will be worshiping. And we'll pick up where the Queen of Sheba comes to visit him. So we'll still be in the next time that we do this, we'll still be in the United Kingdom. The kingdom's united under Solomon, but cracks are showing. We'll see if this kingdom stays united. So there we go. That's 1 Kings, chapters 1 through 10. Bless you guys. let's continue on, see if we can put this whole thing together.